You've probably seen the pictures, right? Thousands of people supposedly storming a palace, overthrowing a government in a blaze of glory. But what if one of the most famous revolutions in history was actually something else entirely? What if it was more of a quiet, calculated takeover? Well, today we're going to peel back the layers of propaganda around Russia's 1917 October Revolution and get to the real story.
I mean, think about those classic Soviet films like Eisenstein's October. You see this tidal wave of humanity, this sea of heroic workers and soldiers just crashing against the gates of the Winter Palace. It's a powerful, glorious battle for freedom. And yeah, that was the image the Soviets wanted the world to see, and for a long time, it's what people believed.
But here's the thing. Was that epic battle even real? Or was it just a really well-crafted myth? We're going to dig into the actual historical records, the eyewitness accounts, and find out what really went down on the streets of Petrograd during those world-changing days.
Okay, so to really get this, we've got to rewind a bit to the fall of 1917. Now the Tsar, he was already gone, overthrown back in February. But the new provisional government that took his place was, to put it mildly, teetering on the edge of a cliff. Russia was a nation in absolute chaos.
The government was failing on pretty much every front you can imagine. It kept Russia in the deeply, deeply unpopular World War I, a war that was literally bleeding the country dry. Back home, people in the cities were starving, factories were shutting their doors, and out in the countryside, peasants were tired of waiting for promises and just started taking the land for themselves. And the national debt, it was astronomical. The whole country was just falling apart at the seams.
And just to give you an idea of how bad it really was, by that autumn, a staggering 50%, half of all industrial businesses in the most important regions had just closed. Now that's not just a statistic. That means mass unemployment, families with no way to get food, and this deep, grinding sense of despair that created the perfect breeding ground for radical, desperate change.
And into this total power vacuum steps one of history's most determined figures, Vladimir Lenin. While most people were looking at this chaos and seeing a complete disaster, Lenin, who was actually in hiding in Finland at the time, saw something totally different. He saw a golden, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for his Bolshevik party to grab power. And you have to understand, Lenin was absolutely frantic. From his hideout, he was just unleashing this barrage of letters on his party's Central Committee, practically screaming at them to act. He was completely convinced that their popularity was at its absolute peak and that the government was totally helpless. To wait, he argued, wasn't just a mistake, it was a betrayal of the revolution itself.
So on the night of October 10th, Lenin, decked out in a wig and glasses, actually sneaks back into Petrograd for this secret all-night meeting that would literally decide the fate of Russia. He argued passionately, relentlessly, for an immediate uprising. But two of his top guys, Zinoviev and Kamenev, they pushed back, and they pushed back hard. They were terrified that jumping the gun would be a total catastrophe that would turn everyone against them.
I mean, this debate raged for hours. But in the end, Lenin's unshakable conviction, his sheer force of will, it just carried the day. The vote came in 10-2. That was it. The die was cast. The Bolsheviks were officially going to prepare for an armed takeover.
All right, so the decision was made. But how did they actually pull it off? This is where that whole myth of the heroic storming of the palace was born. But the reality, well, it was way more precise and a lot less chaotic than you'd think.
Over the course of just 2 days, Bolshevik-led soldiers and their Red Guards pulled off this brilliant, almost surgical takeover of the city. See, they didn't get into massive street battles. Instead, they seized the city's nervous system, the telegraph station, the post office, the railway hubs, all the key bridges. It was a clinical operation, and the government was just totally powerless to do anything about it.
So what about that legendary storming of the Winter Palace? Well, the propaganda shows this massive, heroic charge against a heavily defended fortress. The reality was almost comically anticlimactic. By the time the Bolsheviks made their move, most of the palace's so-called defenders had just left. They'd gone home. The insurgents didn't storm the gates. They literally just walked in through unlocked back doors. That famous blank shot from the cruiser Aurora, it wasn't the start of a huge battle. It was just a signal. The government ministers inside basically gave up without a fight.
Okay, so seizing power is one thing, but holding on to it, that's a whole different ballgame. With the old government under arrest, the Bolsheviks had to make their takeover look legitimate, and they had the perfect stage, the Second Congress of Soviets, which, very conveniently, was in session at that exact moment.
Their first moves were just strokes of pure political genius, totally designed to win over the people.
The decree on peace was a direct message to the millions of war-weary soldiers, promising an immediate end to the fighting. And the decree on land? It just gave an official thumbs up to the peasant land seizures that were already happening anyway. With those two simple acts, they instantly gave the vast majority of Russians exactly what they wanted most.
And then you have this incredible moment of pure political theater. As their rival socialist parties are walking out of the Congress to protest the takeover, Leon Trotsky turns to them and hurls this unforgettable insult at their backs. It was just this stunning display of the Bolsheviks' absolute confidence and their total contempt for anyone who stood in their way.
So all of this brings us to the question that historians have been fighting over for more than a century. What exactly was this event that changed the world? Was it a genuine popular revolution from the ground up? Or was it a brilliantly orchestrated coup d'etat by a small, determined group?
The debate really boils down to three main ways of looking at it. You've got the official Soviet story, right? A heroic and inevitable mass uprising. Then there's the classic Western Cold War view, a sinister, backroom coup by a ruthless party that snuffed out Russia's chance at democracy. And finally, there's a more modern, nuanced take, that even though it wasn't a huge action in the streets, the Bolsheviks did tap into a deep well of popular support because their simple slogan, peace, land, and bread, was exactly what millions of people were desperate to hear.
In the end, the October Revolution was this complex cocktail of widespread desperation, brilliant political timing, and just ruthless, decisive action. It wasn't the grand, heroic myth of Soviet propaganda, but it wasn't just a simple backroom coup either. It was a seizure of power in a vacuum, a mullet that forces us to ask a really fundamental question about how history works. Is it shaped by the great, sweeping will of the people, or by the focused iron will of a few?